We're live here with the Reverend Dr. Rosemary Beals.
Doctor?
Yeah. What's your doctorate in?
It's not medical, so don't come to me for bumps and bruises and broken bones.
Good boundaries.
I have a doctor of ministry in educational leadership.
Pedagogical bumps and bruises.
We're not going to be asking about that, though. Rosemary, how do we come to know God?
We come to know God through, well, the right answer is scripture, tradition, and reason, correct? But
Beautiful.
in my experience, we come to know God through story. Stories and through other people, in stories communally.
What's a favorite story of yours, of God's, that comes to mind?
Such a good question, especially for this time of year. The Exodus.
Love that one. Pools, chases, everything you need. Excitement. That also tragedy. Yeah, it gets pretty sad. Most importantly, however, flying frogs.
Well, this is not the part I dwell on, to be honest. The frogs in the bathtubs and the gnats and the other plagues. But, I tell this story in Godly Play, which is very near and dear to me. And so it's really about the core metaphor, which is coming through the water to freedom. And so it's perfect for this time of year with the Paschal Mystery. Don't you agree?
I do agree. Color me compelled.
Are we live? Have we decided what we want to say?
That's so gonna be over. Okay, all right. Calm down.
I feel like the thing that I want to say is that
Boop, boop, boop.
reading scripture by yourself, I hate that. That is unacceptable. Hi. That feels really not good.
But we could just do it ASMR style the whole time. I love late antique practices of reading. Ugh! So I'm giving you C-roll.
Hi. How are you doing? Father Will, what did you think of my sermon on Sunday?
You can't laugh before I give the punchline. Father Ethan, I thought that your sermon was both well-researched and well-founded, and also left me with questions.
My gosh. What kinds of questions?
First and foremost, how dare you? No, my first question, I heard so much from you about framing scripture and bringing an expectation to scripture that it can widen our experience of our human lives, right? That it can transform us. And especially, you mentioned, if we read the Bible with other people in community. But why? What's different about that? Is a question that I wondered. If you're not prepared to answer that question.
I think part of what we get to think about when we think about the Bible is that, for so long, the experience of the Bible was people reading it and saying it and reciting it and hearing it and wondering about it together. And in some ways, we do that on Sunday mornings, but most often it's our receiving of Scripture with the preacher in the role of interpreter, but our receiving of that. And I think I spend a lot of time wondering what it feels like to create a shared experience, to create a shared narrative, to create a shared interpretation of what Scripture is. Because the same way that we talk about, you can't be a Christian by yourself, it's what does it look like to frame these things as team sports? And to know that it's a game that we play together, even if sometimes that means we practice on our own.
If scripture reading was a sport, what sport would it be?
Decathlon.
Wait, that's actually a really good answer.
Heptathlon.
Sure. I don't speak Russian.
Pentathlon.
Greek, rather. But you used a Russian word in your sermon this Sunday.
It's because it's like 7 different genres of literature all rolled into one.
Well, I was just going to say that's one of the things that I find like most freeing about scripture, but is also the one that like is most puzzling, I think, to a lot of folks, is that so much of Christianity, particularly a Christian American Christianity, has framed scripture as this like, oh, it's the good book that tells you what to do, but it's prescriptive. When in my experience, the gift of scripture is that it is descriptive. There are certainly parts where Jesus is like, hey, feed the poor, clothe the naked, be with the marginalized. Like, yes, we should do those things. But so much more often, scripture is like reflecting what it is like to be a human. The worst of us, the best of us, everything in between, in all of those different genres that you mentioned.
Yeah, I think it's it takes a minute to sort of wrap your brain around to think like, even in the Gospels, the prescriptivity is like our telling the story of a people grappling with someone who's offering a way of life. Like, the coherent picture of the story is a story of a people. And there's prescriptivity inside of that, but also people's reactions against it, people's fear of it, people's longing for it, all of this. And it's really something to think about the total picture of the Bible, like all 66 books, as like the storytelling of and by a people about themselves and about their relationships with one another and with God. And that looks like so many different literary genres. Like, it's mythology, it's lore, it's narrative, it's genealogy, it's song, it's poetry, it's storytelling, it's letters, it's all kinds of stuff. And so it takes a little bit of extra work to think through, like, I'm not just reading one book all the way through written in a single author's voice toward a single end. It's this like anthology collection of people's storytelling and self-expression about them and about God.
Do you remember when we were both at youth group and I lied to them and said that there were 83 books in the Bible?
Is that counting like Apocrypha?
And no, that was just like the wrong answer.
We just made up a number.
But I love this idea of the Bible being united about this story of a people who are grappling with a God who has a vision and a hope for them, and the challenge of that, and the beauty of that, and the gift of that, because that's what we're doing.
I know, it's so it. I think, like, I hear a lot of pressure, like, internalized sort of peer pressure from people about, like, I should be a better Bible reader. Or even the insinuation of, like, I think this is kind of boring. I kind of don't really get it. And I'm expected to pursue this discipline that ultimately just doesn't feel like anything to me. Right? Like, sort of the pressure that you feel to be, like, a morning person when you're just not a morning person. Like, that somehow your experience of Scripture should be suffering. Like, just suffering and discipline and boring. And I think so often, like, that's how the experience of Christianity is framed for people. Of, like, if I'm not expected to connect with this. I just need to suffer through it. And I think if we reframe the Bible as the experience of a people trying to understand themselves and understand God, like, to some extent, that's work that we're doing now and that we can do on our own. But mostly we do that work in community with other people. Like, I don't really sit around in my house all day thinking about what it's like to be a person. I'm, like, talking about it with people. I'm out in the world experiencing it. And it just makes me wonder, you know, for people who struggle with the individual discipline of Scripture reading, how much different it would feel to do it with other people and to have other people to sort of reflect and cast these ideas against and see what sticks.
I was part of a Bible study that read through the whole of the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. And we were like in the middle of Numbers, which is this long genealogy thing. And I think that all of us were like, what is the point of knowing whose father was whose grandfather? And it was great because we were doing it together. Because I was in this this group of people that I liked who were able to find interesting things, who were able to listen for the whisper of the Spirit in that room because we were fond of one another and we were in community.
I feel like if this is something, I'm talking to you, if this is something that you're interested in, let us know. Call us. Let us know. It may be that there are other people that are looking to do this too. We also can connect you with resources. We can give you a pep talk. Who knows? Maybe we'll start a Bible study here.
Bye!
Is that it?
Yeah. We've been talking for 10 minutes. These are always a little bit too long.
This is also our last episode.
Oh my god, now you have to cut that out. I'm so sorry.
It has been so fun to journey with you all through this season of Lent.
It's been so funny to journey with you. Other Ethan.
Stop, no you.
Okay.
Let's not get too dramatic here.